We're going through God's story in the Bible. In the story of the Israelites, God's chosen people. And we've seen David, King David, God's chosen king. Under David, the promised land, the borders of the promised land were secured for the first time under King David. And under King David, the 12 tribes of Israel were for the first time consolidated. So under King David, the borders were secured and the 12 tribes were all consolidated under David for the first time. It was David's desire to build a temple for the Lord's presence. The Lord said, "No, I want your son to build my temple." Specifically, David had many sons, and he said specifically, "I want your son Solomon to build my temple." So Solomon succeeded David. He built the temple. But Solomon made a huge mistake. He married many foreign wives, and his foreign wives turned his heart away from the one true God to follow the other gods from other nations. Solomon got to the point at the end where he actually allowed idols for the foreign gods, the idols of the foreign gods, to be set up in the temple beside the altar of the one true God. Because of this, because Solomon allowed idols to be set up in the temple, God said, "I'm going to tear the kingdom away from you, Solomon. But for the sake of David, my servant, I will not tear the kingdom completely away." So God raised up Jeroboam, one of Solomon's officials. Jeroboam, God set him up as the king of the 10 northern tribes. The 10 northern tribes, Samaria, the city of Samaria was their capital. Judah and Benjamin remained in the south with Jerusalem as their capital. In the Bible, the 10 northern tribes will either be referred to as Israel or Samaria after their capital city. The tribes of Judah and Benjamin are referred to as Judah, and their capital remained Jerusalem. Jeroboam did something even more evil in God's eyes than Solomon. Jeroboam actually replaced the altar of God with 2 golden calves. He set up a golden calf at the furthest northern city of Israel, and he set up a golden calf at the furthest southern city of the territory that the 10 tribes of Israel occupied. So there were 2 golden calves in Israel, Samaria. And Jeroboam completely replaced the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with the 2 golden calves and said, "People of Israel, here are your gods. These are the gods that delivered you from Egypt." And because of this, Jeroboam had a very bad ending. And after Jeroboam, the country of Israel, the nation of Israel, was in centuries of civil war between the 10 northern tribes and Judah and Benjamin in the south. After Jeroboam, the northern tribes, Israel, had 20 kings after Jeroboam. None of them followed the Lord faithfully. Judah had 20 kings also after Jeroboam. Solomon's son Rehoboam assumed the crown in Jerusalem, and he was horrible, just terrible. 20 kings in Judah, in the southern part of Israel, also only 4 of those 20 were faithful to the Lord. So as we go through the story of the kings in 1 Kings and 2 Kings, we see all of these different kings in, again, out of 40 total, out of 40 kings, only 4, and they were from Judah, only 4 followed the Lord faithfully. And we get to the part we're going to cover today In 1 Kings chapter 16, we meet a very famous evil king and his even more famous evil queen. She's actually so evil that she becomes the personification of evil, actually, in the Bible. 1 Kings chapter 16, I'm starting with verse 29. This is in your notes. 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 29. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah. Now, Asa was one of the good kings in Judah. He was one of the good kings. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel. This is the north. And he reigned in Samaria, that's the capital. He reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sons of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel. Remember that name, Jezebel. He also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. Baal, spelled B-A-A-L, the chief god of the Canaanites. I have a suggestion for you. It's just a suggestion. If you have a daughter, I'd suggest that you do not name her Jezebel. Just for what it's worth. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. So Ahab actually built a temple for Baal, Jezebel's god, his wife, his queen. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than did all the kings of Israel before him. So Ahab marries Jezebel, horrible follower of Baal and Asherah. He not only builds a temple for Baal, but he builds an Asherah pole also. Does more to provoke the anger of the Lord than any of the kings before him. This is also in your notes. Baal was the fertility god of the Canaanites. This is very important. Together with his female counterpart, Asherah, Baal was believed to send rain and fertilize the earth. So the people that worship these gods believe that the rain comes from Baal and Asherah. By engaging in ritual human sexual intercourse, in essence showing the gods a pornographic movie. Now whenever you come in the Bible to the shrine prostitutes or the temple prostitutes, that's what they're doing. They're engaging in sexual intercourse, hoping to stimulate these foreign gods to send rain. By engaging in ritual human sexual intercourse, in essence showing the gods a pornographic movie, it was believed that Baal and Asherah would get sexually stimulated, consummate their relationship, and fertilize the earth by sending rain. Now this is very important. Remember, in Egypt, there were how many plagues? God sent how many plagues before he delivered Israel? 10 plagues. Now remember, God told Moses, he said, now you're going to go to Pharaoh and you're going to say, set my people free, but I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. Think about that. God is sending Moses to set his people free. He wants his people to be set free, but he tells Moses, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. There's a reason that God hardens Pharaoh's heart. And there's a reason that God needed to send the 10 plagues. What was he doing with each of those plagues? With each of those plagues, he was defeating one of Egypt's gods. Okay? With each of those plagues, God was defeating one of the Egyptian gods. He was showing the Egyptians and the Israelites, I am the one true God. Some of the Egyptians came to believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because they watched him defeat all of the Egyptian gods through the plagues. Baal is the god that these people and the Canaanites believe send rain. So, We pick up the story, 1 Kings chapter 17, and we meet Elijah, who seems to just drop out of heaven. Just comes on the scene. We don't know anything about his past. Now Elijah the Tishbite, well, we know where he's from. Elijah the Tishbite in Gilead said to Ahab, this is very important, said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. So the God of Israel sends his man to Ahab, who set up a temple to Baal, the God of rain, and he says, there will not be rain in this land except by my word. Okay? Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan. Now why would he tell Elijah to hide? Because it's not going to be raining for a long time. They'll probably want to kill him. So, that's not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons. You will drink from the brook, and I have ordered the ravens to feed you there. He has ordered the ravens to feed Elijah there. So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Elijah's being fed by ravens. God is building Elijah's faith. He's building his faith. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, go at once to Zarephath of Sidon and stay there. His water supply's gone. His water supply's gone. He tells him to go. Sometimes when we come in across difficulties in our life, you know what? Sometimes we will hear from God and we'll do what we know in our hearts God is telling us to do, and we'll come to a place where it's difficult. And God might tell us to go do something. He might tell us that we have to act. We can't just lay there feeling sorry for ourselves. Well, God, you told me to do this and now I don't have anything to drink. Listen, He might tell you to go do something. You may have to act. So He tells him, go. Your water supply's gone. I want you to go to this place. I have commanded a widow in that place to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, remember, God said, I've commanded a widow there to feed you. Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? And as she was going to get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. Remember, God's told him, I've commanded this person to feed you. Okay? So he sees a widow and says, hey, I need a drink, and please get me some bread also. As surely as the Lord your God lives, this is what the widow says to him. It's very important that we understand that this widow is not an Israelite. God has sent Elijah to someone who's not an Israelite. And she says, as surely as your God lives, as surely as your God lives, not my God, your God. It would be like if someone came from Platte City and we said, oh, you serve the pirate god. Well, as surely as the pirate god lives. Get it? And who would our God be? Don't say the Blue Jays. It's Northman. Our God's the Northman. We got some Oak Park kids here. Oak Park. Oak Park. Northman. Anyway, I digress. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat it and die. All she has is enough flour for this last meal. Her and her son are going to have bread and water one last time before they die. Okay? Many times, God allows us to get to where we don't have anything left. We don't have anything left. It might be money. It might be just intestinal fortitude. We might come to the end of our supply of a lot of different things. Many times He will take us to where there's nothing left. We're at the end. This is the end. Now, why would He do that? Because He's teaching us to depend on Him. And because He's building our faith. He's building our faith. Okay? So, she's got enough for one last meal. Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small cake of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son." So Elijah says, okay, you only have enough for one last meal, but before you even make it for yourself, give me some. Okay? "For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel says, the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord gives rain on the land." If you'll remember, when Jesus walked the earth, the miracle where He feeds the thousands of people, the disciples come to Him and say, "There's all these people and we have nothing to eat." And Jesus asked them, "Well, what do we have?" This is another lesson from God. When we come to the end of our supply of whatever it is, money, food, our wits, whatever. You've heard the saying, "I'm on my last nerve with you." Jesus always said, well, what do we have? If you'll think of the times when He fed the thousands of people, He asked them, what do we have? And one time there was a little boy who had a little fish and a couple of loaves of bread. And Jesus took what they had and then He multiplied it. Sometimes when we're in a bad way, God will say, what do you have? What do you have available to you? What do you have available to you? And we'll start there. I remember a time, the Bible tells us, God promises us that if we bring our tithe to church, He will open the floodgates. That's a promise from God. I remember a time I had to, I haven't been very good with money for most of my life. And I was sitting there at church and it was put money in the offering, my tithe, or if I did that, I wasn't going to make it till Friday. If I did that, I wasn't going to make it till Friday. So you know what I did? I took what I had. Put it in there. Out of faith. I took what I had, I put it in there. And I don't even have to tell you how the story ends, do I? I got money before Friday. I got a check in the mail for something that, it was a miracle. It was a miracle. But that's what He'll do. When we get to where we think it's the end, when times are bad, many times He'll say, well, what do you have available to you? And we'll start with that. She has only enough for one more meal. And Elijah says, that's okay. We're going to start with that. And it never ran out. That supply never ran out. She went away and did as Elijah had told her. What did she have to lose? It was her last meal anyway. What did she have to lose? So she went away and did what Elijah told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. God's building His faith. Building His faith. Maybe God's building your faith for something. Maybe there's something that God has for you to do that only faith in God is going to be able to accomplish it. Maybe He's building your faith for something in the future now. Something you're going to need. Probably be to help someone else. Remember, this woman is not an Israelite. She went away, did as Elijah told her, for the jar of flour was not used up and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" This is very important. Why would God bring him all this way just to let that boy die? That doesn't even make sense. And then she says, "What have you done here?" She says, this is very important. "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" It's very important when she says, "Did you come to remind me of my sin?" She acknowledges that she's a sinner. She acknowledges that she's a sinner. "Did you come to remind me of my sin?" She doesn't rationalize her sin away. This is very important. Many times God will bring us to a place where we can only get out of this with divine help, and many times it is to help us get past something so that we will become more the image of God, so that we will become more mature spiritually. So there's something in her life that she's aware of that she needs to get past, or something that's been weighing on her. Because her first thing is, what have you done? Did you come to remind me of my sin? It's very important. She's acknowledged her sin. She hasn't rationalized it away. And this is one of the messages that God has for us today. What did Jesus say? "I did not come to judge the world. I came to save the world." God did not send Elijah to judge her. She's already admitted her sin. She's already owned up to it. "Give me your son," Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought tragedy also upon this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times. Sometimes you have to do it more than once. 3 times, and cried to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." God proving to her, I don't bring up sins that you've already confessed. That's not me. I didn't send my son to earth just so that I could keep throwing up in your face all of your shortcomings. That's not God. If you've confessed a sin and you keep being reminded of it, you're not being reminded by God. Not if you've owned up. As long as you're not rationalizing, as long as you're not making excuses for your sin, if you own up and you've confessed it, God moves on. And we need to also. If you've confessed something and you start feeling guilt about something you've already confessed, it's not God, that's the devil. The Bible tells us that the devil is our accuser. That's what he does. He constantly accuses us. And he'll constantly come to us and say, "You really think that what you did, you really think that all you have to do is say you're sorry and you're forgiven?" That's what the devil does. God does not throw up our past sins in our face. He's in the forgiveness business. He's in the forgiveness business. So, the Lord heard Elijah's cry. The son is risen from the dead. Elijah's faith is building. God's building Elijah's faith. Building his faith. Building his faith. Remember, if you're in hard times, maybe God is building your faith for something in the future. Something that He wants you to do in the future. Then the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." Now I know that what you say is true. She's seen it. Okay? So, chapter 18. This is the last chapter today. This is why Elijah is considered the chief among the prophets. It was Elijah and Moses who were with Jesus at the Transfiguration. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab. Remember what he said to Ahab? It's not going to rain until I say so. It's been 3.5 years. 3.5 years without any rain. Go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So God's told Elijah, I'm going to send rain. Does God lie? No. Does Elijah believe? Yes. God has been building his faith for 3.5 years. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, that's the capital of the northern Israel. And Ahab had summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of his palace. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord, while Jezebel, remember Jezebel, bad. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets. So she was killing the prophets of the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. So Obadiah, while Jezebel's going around Israel killing all the prophets of God, Obadiah hides 100 of them, 50 in each cave. And he's feeding them. Ahab had said to Obadiah, go through the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass. So basically Ahab says, you go this way and I'll go that way because we need to find grass to feed our animals because I don't want to have to start killing our animals. So they do it. And while Obadiah goes this way and Ahab goes that way, Obadiah runs into Elijah. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground and said, is it really you, my lord Elijah? Yes, he replied. Go tell your master Elijah is here. What have I done wrong? Said Obadiah, that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death. As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent anyone to look for you. So Ahab's been looking for Elijah. And Obadiah's had to hide these other prophets. And now Elijah's saying, go to Ahab and tell him that I'm here. And Obadiah's afraid because Ahab's been looking for him to kill him. And if Obadiah says, hey, I know where Elijah is, it could mean trouble. Could mean trouble for Obadiah. But Elijah assures him, hey, don't worry, I got this. So, this is what Obadiah says to him. I don't know whether the Spirit of the Lord may carry you. I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Okay? And then he says, I've hidden 100 of God's prophets. Come on, man, don't bring me this trouble. And Elijah says, just trust. So he does. Obadiah does it. Elijah said, I'm in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 15. Elijah said, as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him. And Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to them, is that you, you troubler of Israel? He's blaming this on Elijah. But whose fault is it really? It's Ahab's fault this is happening. Ahab's putting the blame on Elijah, but it's Ahab's fault. You troubler of Israel. I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now, summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel. And bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Jezebel supports 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of Asherah. They eat at Jezebel's table. She supports them. 850 prophets in all against one, Elijah. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." That's the mistake Solomon made. Solomon put up these idols beside the altar of the Lord. He straddled. He straddled between the Lord and the world. The Lord and the world. And Elijah's telling them, make up your mind. Serve God or serve Baal, but don't serve both. I believe that's part of what the Lord is saying to the church now. Quit straddling the fence. Quit trying to imitate the world. Get on one side or the other. Do not straddle the fence. The people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left." That's not true. Elijah is very human. He says, "I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left." That's not true. Obadiah told him that he'd hidden 100. Elijah is very human. That should give us all comfort. God's getting ready to do something really big through Elijah. Elijah is one of the giants of the Bible, but he's very, very human. Elijah is prone to being over dramatic. That's what he's doing here. He's very prone. If you keep coming back, it gets way more interesting if you'll keep coming back. Way more interesting. But Elijah is prone to being over dramatic. He's prone to being oversensitive, and he's prone to self-pity. He's very human, very human. Very flawed, actually, in human terms. Very flawed. Over-dramatic, oversensitive, and prone to self-pity. That should bring us all comfort. Through the years, different people have asked me at different times, they've said, "Are you a prophet?" And I've said, "No, I just happen to be over-dramatic, oversensitive, and prone to self-pity." So I find comfort in this. So, I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left. But Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls. So he tells the people, get stuff for a sacrifice, 2 bulls and these things. The prophets of Baal, there's 850 of those. They're going to be on one side, and I'm going to be with another sacrifice on the other side. So the people do what they say. And this is what Elijah says. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given to them and prepared it. So the way they offer sacrifices is they have to offer the animal, they have to burn it in the fire. It's called a burnt offering. So they have to, in order to sacrifice to the God, they have to burn the animal. It's called a burnt offering. And Elijah says, you take a bull, you prophets, and I'm going to take a bull. I represent the one true living God. And whichever bull is consumed by fire, fire is going to come from one of these gods. Either my God or your God is going to consume the bull with fire. Okay? So the prophets, all the people say, yeah, that's a good deal. That's a good deal. One of these offerings is going to be consumed by fire from God. And they all agree to it. Okay? Then the prophets of Baal, then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Oh, Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." See, he's using sarcasm. He's taunting them. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. No fire comes and consumes this bull. Elijah let them go first. Now it's time for the evening offering. All day they danced around, cut themselves, nothing. Now it's Elijah's turn. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." Now what's scarce in the land? What's scarce in the land? Water. Water's very scarce. It hasn't rained for 3.5 years. And this is what Elijah tells them to do. Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which was in ruins. Jezebel had destroyed the altar of the Lord. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it, large enough to hold basically 15 liters of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." Water's already scarce, and he tells them to take all this water, pour it on the bull, pour it on all the wood. When they finish, he says, "Do it again." And they do it again. Okay? At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." We cannot pass over this. This is Elijah, the man of God. "O Lord, they will know that you will know. O Lord, they will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Did you know that's a promise from God? You know, in my past, I've had certain sins that, to be honest with you, I enjoyed them too much to really want to let go. But did you know that's a promise in the Bible? Psalm 51. Psalm 51, after David commits adultery with Bathsheba. Psalm 51. Do you know that if you pray that God will create a new heart in you? If there's something if there's something you're struggling with that you just can't seem to let go of, do you know that we have a promise from God that if we say, "God, change my heart about this," He will do it? Anyone ever heard of St. Augustine? Augustine was the bishop of Hippo way thousands of years ago. And he was a horrible womanizer. Horrible womanizer. Augustine's actually the first great mind of Christianity. Everyone agrees. Protestants, Catholics, Orthodox, everyone agrees that Augustine is the first great Christian mind in history. He was a horrible womanizer. And in his autobiography, it's called Confessions. He's confessing all the things that he did before he turned his life over to God. He confesses that his prayer was this: "Lord, please take this lust from me, but not yet." He was admitting, I admit, I like this one. But if we keep reading in his confessions, he kept praying, "God, you're going to have to change my heart about this. You're going to have to do it because I like it too much." I don't know. I think if I'm ever going to really be able to stay away from chocolate, I think God's going to have to do that for me. But He promises that He will. Okay? So, I'm not saying that eating chocolate's a sin, but if you eat as much as I do, okay? So, here we go. That's his prayer. You are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice. Remember, they drenched it in water. The fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." Remember, it hasn't rained for 3.5 years. So Ahab went off to eat and drink. But Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. And he began to pray for rain. He began to pray for rain. We just have a few more verses left today, and then we're finished. But before I just finish these last few verses, I have a question to ask of you. Who is very conspicuously absent here? In this scenario, who is very conspicuously absent? Jezebel. She's not there. She's not there. She's the one that supports them. She's the one that destroyed the altar of the Lord. She's the one who's been killing the prophets of the Lord. But she is the only one who's not there. You really need to come back next week to find out what's going on. But she is very conspicuously absent. She's not there. Okay? So, Elijah says, "Go eat and drink, for there's a sound of a heavy rain." And then he goes to the top of the mountain and he starts to pray for the rain. "Go and look toward the sea," he told his servant. And he went up and looked. "There is nothing there," he said. Wait a minute. He's praying for rain. He tells his servant, "Go and look." No, nothing. Nothing. Okay? 7 times. 7 times. 7 is the number for what? That symbolizes what? Completion. 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time, the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." A very, very, very small cloud. After the 7th time, a very small cloud is rising up from the sea. But Elijah he prayed 7 times and said, "Go look." We cannot quit before the time of completion. Sometimes we have to pray. Sometimes we have to keep praying and keep praying. If you're praying on a promise in the Bible, if there's a promise in the Bible and you're praying it, keep praying. Keep praying. So Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." In other words, it's going to rain so bad that if you don't get home, you're not going to make it. It's going to rain so bad and so fast that if you don't get home, you're not going to make it. So go. Here's in Jezebel's home, where Jezebel is in the Jezreel Valley. They're up on the top of Mount Carmel. Ahab's palace and where Jezebel is, is in the Jezreel Valley. And Elijah, before it ever starts raining, his servant says, "There's one cloud. There's one cloud." And Elijah tells Ahab, "You better get home fast or you're not going to make it." So Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down there before the rain stops you." Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose. A heavy rain came on, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. That's where Jezebel and him live. The power of the Lord came upon Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel, which is 20 miles. Those of you that think you're so hot running your marathons and I can't even run 1 mile, I'm just playing. Elijah ran in front of the chariot for 20 miles because the power of the Lord came upon him. And where do you think they're going? Where do you think they're going? They're going to get Jezebel. She wasn't there. But I'm not going to tell you why they're going to get Jezebel until next week. So let's pray.